Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Truman and Ms. Khare, for being with us today. Canadians are generous people, and the work you do is important because Canadians need confidence that their charitable dollars are being spent um, as they should be. Uh, we heard last week from the National Council of Canadian Muslims, and before that from other witnesses in the study. We also heard from the tax ombudsman himself last week. And my question, I think, is to Ms. Khare, but I leave it up to you who should answer that. I refer to the findings of the International Civil Liberties Monitoring Group, where they conclude that Islamophobia exists in the CRA because 6 of 8 charities that were revoked between 2015 and 2008 to 2015 happen to be Muslim charities. 6 of 8, 75%, whatever that number is. And they take this evidence as proof of Islamophobia in the system, particularly within the CRA. And you know from the Islamophobia Summit that was held in 2020, the treatment of Muslim charities was a priority, raised as a priority. What is your response to these allegations?
All right. So, very nice, very good question. In terms of the 6 of 8 number that has been circulating, I think we need to put this into context, as Mr. Truman just said. Since 2008-09, when RAD was established, we have completed as a directorate almost 8,000 audits of registered charities. And within our RAD program, we've completed 39 audits. And those audits have led to a range of outcomes. One outcome is revocation, and that is reserved for the most serious instances of non-compliance with the provisions of the Income Tax Act. So that's 14 out of 39 audits. We've also closed RAD audits with outcomes such as compliance agreements. So that's an understanding of how the organization will operate going forward, as well as education letters. Vis-a-vis the allegations that there is Islamophobia within the Charities Directorate based on this particular study, I think the minister did launch the review with the ombudsperson to look into these concerns that have been raised by Muslim-led charities, and I'm looking forward to that report and the recommendations that come out of that, because I hope that will help us improve our services to all charities, but those in particular. The minister also appointed, in a very proactive manner, 2 members to the advisory committee on the charitable sector that bring the perspective of Muslim-led charities to the table. So I sit on the advisory committee on the charitable sector, so does Mr. Truman. And so that also provides us with an opportunity to learn more and to understand. And I think we are very committed to learning more and improving our outreach to all charities that we service. So I think I can start with that. I don't know if you have a follow-up question.
I do, with the permission of the chair, a series of follow-up questions, just because they build off each other, Madam Chair.
Please go ahead.
But I still don't understand. You gave us a pretty general answer. I appreciate that, Ms. Khare. But even to an outsider, the startling fact that 6 of 8 charities audited by RAD, 6 of 8 charities revoked, were Muslim charities. Were they, we don't know what was the reason behind their revocation. You likely do. Can you comment on the number, and would you not agree with the Canadian public, at least with the senators here, that is an extraordinary high number of charities of one religion alone that are revoked? would you not agree with that?
I'm not sure that I want to get into a numbers debate right now, but I think when we look at the RAD program in particular, it's a very niche compliance program. So RAD audits are only undertaken when there is a risk of terrorism abuse. And so we're looking for some type of linkage between what the activities of the charity are and potential links to threat actors. And so it's really, we're not working within a framework that we have established and created at the CRA. We are part of a whole of government approach when it comes to national security. And the Department of Finance is responsible for something called the National Inherent Risk Assessment. And this is a document, the last publication was in 2015. It's available on the Government of Canada's website, and it really summarizes where threat actors pose a risk of terrorist financing in Canada. And it really sets out the shared understanding of risk across all of the national security partners. So if you look at the risk actors and the current risk environment in Canada, I think you could reach the conclusion that many of the organizations that are listed in the National Inherent Risk Assessment do come from racialized communities, but that is not a CRA document. It is something that is led by the Department of Finance, and we are part of a whole of government understanding of the risks posed in this space of terrorist financing.
Thank you, Ms. Khare. You mentioned the tax ombudsman a number of times. Mr. Below appeared last week, and he agreed with our conclusion that he has been given a mandate to complete, and he is unable to complete it because one hand is tied behind his back. He is unable to get the information that is required. He's unable to get it from you, information that would be required and necessary for him to complete his report because it is heavily redacted. And he is not able to get the unredacted version because of because of national security related aspects of your work, even though some members of his staff may have top secret clearance. So can you comment on that? Are you making it easier for him? Are you trying to find solutions? Because we're all waiting for this report, and we just heard last week that this report is going to be incomplete at best.
Okay, so we do understand that the ombudsperson has expressed concerns about the mandate that he's been provided with. We have some very formal mechanisms within the Canada Revenue Agency for having conversations with the ombudsperson's office. So, that is something that we are pursuing. With respect to the protection of confidential taxpayer information, we do have responsibilities as public servants at the CRA to protect this information. That's something very fundamental to ensuring that Canadians have trust in their tax regulator. And vis-a-vis the ombudsperson's access to confidential taxpayer information, that is not something that we can provide without the authorization of the charity. So if a charity provides the ombudsperson with authorization to access their files, I see that you're shaking your head at me.
Testimony of the ombudsperson is very fresh in our minds. Even when the charity gives the authorization for accessing the files, sections of the information are still heavily redacted. So it comes back to the question of open information for the tax ombudsman.
So there still will be some information that is redacted. So if the charities file contains third-party information, that would be redacted. And when it comes to our risk assessments and our audit techniques, that is not something that we share.
Final question, and then I really must cede the ground to my colleagues. Was the minister aware? Did you make the minister aware that the tax ombudsman would have limited access to the information before the mandate was handed down?
I'm sorry, that's not a question I can answer because I wasn't part of that discussion.
Thank you.